Kia ora. I'd like to start about framing the way I think about opportunities in this fairly heavy subject. And then I'm going to link that back to some of my own practice and a bit of a framework that I've found really useful in my own practice, and I'll give some examples of how I've managed to get some things across the line by thinking about what I do through this particular framework. So Frank, in the session that came up from Dunedin, did a really good job of describing an example of regenerative farming. So the idea not just that by change in practice, farming doesn't do quite as much harm, but actual fact, that activity can be spun around and done in a way that actually adds value, that can make the world a better place, not just limiting it to not as bad a place. Yeah, and I think a lot of sustainability we do have to start reframing, because so much of what we do is kind of not screwing things up quite as bad as we could have. Yeah, and that's not really an aspirational line, and you don't have to paraphrase the definition of sustainability in the Brundtland report very much for it to come to that sort of conclusion. So let's start thinking about what can we do that is regenerative? What can we do that's actually going to make the world a better place, not just as bad a place? Yeah, and I think opportunities is what we should be looking at there. It's not opportunities to dial something back a little bit. It's not opportunities to take the edge off. Yeah, it's opportunities to transform what we do and see things in a different way that's going to really, really add value. Yeah, so let's lift our eyes, lift the bar, yeah, and start thinking about regenerative practice, not just sustainable practice. And that's not saying the sustainability stuff's not needed. It's needed there as well. Yeah? So I'm here today not as an academic. My role is actually in the operations division of the university. Yeah, so I report to the chief operating officer. So I'm here sort of bridging many different worlds, because I'm here as a practitioner who's involved in writing policy within the university, who's involved with writing strategy within the university, who works with local authorities on policy and plan development. But also, I can do that because I'm really closely connected and have good relationships with academics across a whole range of different areas. Yeah, I can draw on that. I can also and probably the most inspiring part of my job, the most exciting bit of my job, is when we get students and young people involved as well. Because what they bring to the opportunities field is just incredible. Yeah, so not here as an academic, I'm here as that sort of bridge. And what I'd like to talk about is how I think about those connections. And in the bio, George spoke a little bit about living labs. And living labs is a term that's bounded around quite a lot, but not necessarily tied down to an easy definition. So to me, living labs, if we think about this triangle where we have the research that's going on, yeah, and we have operations, and in my example, it might be the operations of the university or the way that it interacts with the local community, and the research informing that, but also those operations being subject of the research to generate more research. Then we also bring in the other corner of the triangle, which is the students and learners, yeah, and they're getting involved in the operations and developing great capabilities and work experience, but also bringing in a different perspective to it that can make the work far more targeted. But to do that, they're having to access and contribute to the research. So we have this great triangle of all three adding up to far, far more than the individual components. Yeah? And I'm talking about that from within the university. We've got lots of examples where we'll set the same thing up by partnering with other agencies outside of the university. Yeah? Now, for that to work, we need to be really aware of the type of context that we're working in. Yeah? And the framework that I've found useful for that is something called the Cynefin framework. Now, Cynefin is a Welsh word. Yeah, it sounds like a swear word. It's great. I love saying Cynefin, Cynefin this, Cynefin that. Yeah, and it means, it talks to the terrain through which you are passing. It has a lot of similarities to the concept of Turaka Waiwai, yeah, but is more transitional, yeah, as opposed to the place in which you stand and belong. Yeah? There's not really an English word that adequately explains it, but it's I have to give credit to Dave Snowden, who developed that framework back in 2007, I think was the first publication of it, and it's developed considerably since then. But the most basic way to explain it is to think about having 3 different domains or 3 different terrains. One which is very ordered and easy to navigate, and you can see your pathway through from a long distance. Another one that is absolute chaos. There's things tumbling around about you, and you've got no idea what's happening around about you. Let's say COVID sits in there. Yeah? But in between those two, there's a really fruitful area, and that's the zone of complexity. Yeah? When we're in complex terrain that is still moving around about us, we can't see our way through it, we can't necessarily see clear cause and effect. So even when we've got big projects, and we can apply, project management methodology, we can take our business case methodologies, we can show off our PMP and Prince badges, yeah, that works fine in that ordered area, yeah, where things can be made concrete and sequential. But when things are changing around about you and the causation is not clear, you can't have best or good practice, because at best, the practice is just emerging and you're trying to steal practice from somewhere else. So for me, knowing which terrain you're in helps to work out what type of opportunities you can pursue. We are actually quite good in that ordered domain. I think as a country, yeah, there's lots of great examples of big sequential projects going on. In COVID, we've shown how we can deal with the chaos all around about us and make some sense of it. And that's a journey that takes us from one zone into the other. But in the complex zone, I think that's where there are so many opportunities that can emerge, but we're perhaps applying our strategies that belong in the other domains, and that suppresses those opportunities. So I guess my challenge today is think about what are the living lab, those triangles that we can pursue, that we can partner with each other on, to try and see what emerges from that complex situation. Things that we can't predetermine, things that we can leave space for. Yeah? And in terms of what Victoria was saying about linking to Indigenous knowledge, if we think about the Pacific concept of Va, yeah, where we're looking at the space between things being more important than the things themselves. Yeah? If we look at the story of the dark emu in Australia, where it's a star constellation that's really hard for Westerners to see, because it's the dark space between the stars that make the shape, not the stars. Yeah? If we think about the much more holistic concepts of well-being, yeah, that we can glean from Te Ao Māori, yeah, then we're starting to see complexity in action from many, many different worldviews. Yeah? Now, on campus, we've got some examples of things that we've managed to achieve that fit into working in different terrains. So for about 5 years now, we've been a single-use cup-free campus. That actually was not a complex problem. Yeah, that just needed some policy to be written, a leader to get behind it, yeah, and some rules to be put in place. Yeah, that's in the ordered domain. Yeah. However, if we look at our food emissions, which is now, we measure and we recognize that as our 3rd biggest emissions category, we have some things we can do in our supply chain that are quite ordered. Yeah, we can choose our suppliers, we can start gathering the data, we can start reporting on the data. We've implemented a Mindful Monday. We tried to call it Meat-Free Monday, but all the Southland farm boys got in a bit of a muddle with that one. So it's a Mindful Monday, so there's no meat on the menu. So they're relatively simple things to do. Yeah, but now to take the next step, we're looking at culture change. Yeah, we're using a sustainability cultures model that's been developed in our Centre for Sustainability by Janet Stevenson. Yeah, and how do we change, and what are the things we need to change the sustainability culture to shift how people choose to eat when they're first years in colleges? And why is that a regenerative opportunity? Because we've got them there in their first year at the university with an opportunity to change how they eat for the rest of their lives. Yeah, and that's when you start zooming out and thinking, how do we create, how do we see the weak signals from the future, and how do we create opportunities for those to come through? So we then have students looking at the psychology students looking at interventions in colleges to get the right information to help students make more informed choices. We have more data available for them. We bring the discussions up. Yeah, so I've got lots of examples of initiatives that have happened in quite ordered contexts, and they only get so far. And then we have to take the leap into the complex and make sure that we're supporting those opportunities to emerge, and the Living Labs is one opportunity that we've used to do that. I've had my time up signal, so thank you very much.